Hello and welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today we're taking a journey into a piece of gear that really truly shaped the sound for so many musicians. We're going to unearth the story behind, well, what's definitely become a modern classic. We are focusing today on the Fulltone OCD overdrive pedal. And if you've ever plugged in a guitar, you get that an effects pedal isn't just some add-on, right? It can be the voice, the grit, the actual soul of your sound. And the OCD, well, it isn't just another overdrive. It really represents a pretty key innovation, I think. It shifted what people expected from guitar tone.
That's absolutely right. Our mission today is basically to get under the skin of the Fulltone OCD. Where did it come from? What's unique about its design? How did it change over time with all those different versions? And importantly, what kind of lasting impact did it have? We really want to unpack why this one pedal seemed to connect so deeply with players, across all sorts of genres.
Okay, let's kick things off right at the start then. Where did the Fulltone OCD actually, spring from? The story starts with its creator, Michael Fuller. He founded Fulltone Musical Products way back in 1991. But the OCD pedal itself, that didn't hit the scene until 2004. And it wasn't just like another distortion pedal thrown into the mix. It was thought up with a really specific idea behind it, an amp-like overdrive. So what did that really mean for guitarists back then?
Yeah, that's really the core of it, isn't it? Amp-like. That wasn't just marketing speak. It was a whole different way of thinking about pedal design. Fuller wanted it to do more than just chop the signal off, like a lot of basic distortion pedals did. The goal was for it to react dynamically to your picking attack, to your guitar's volume knob, kind of like how a real tube amp behaves when you push it. Think about it, right? A good tube amp cleans up if you roll your volume back, or gets dirtier if you just dig in harder with your pick. That kind of dynamic response, that control, a lot of pedals just couldn't offer that back then. It gave players this expressive range that felt much more natural.
And it definitely filled a space in the market, didn't it? It pretty quickly became one of the defining boutique pedals of the 2000s. It wasn't quite a tube screamer, that classic mid-hump, but it wasn't just a plain transparent boost either. It sat somewhere really interesting in between.
Exactly, yeah, to kind of picture where it sat. Imagine the tube screamer is like adding a very specific color, that mid-range focus, right?
Yeah.
Helps you cut through. Clean boosts, well, they just turn you up, mostly without changing your core tone too much. The OCD, though, it was more like getting really precise control over the texture. How much grit, how much sustain, but keeping things clear. It let players be way more nuanced than just stepping on a fuzz box. It wasn't just between. It felt like a different kind of tool.
Right, okay. Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Let's talk about what's actually inside the box, what makes it tick. The core circuit, I understand, is built around MOSFET clipping combined with op-amp circuitry.
Yeah.
Now, for those maybe less deep into the electronics,
Yeah.
what do those things actually do?
Sure, yeah. So MOSFETs. They're a type of transistor. And the cool thing about them is when you push them, they distort in a way that sounds quite a bit like vacuum tubes. You get that smooth, harmonically rich breakup, a bit of that sag feeling people love in tube amps. It's a big part of why the OCD feels so organic and warm. Then the op amp, the operational amplifier, that part shapes the sound with a lot of precision. It makes sure that dynamic feel from the MOSFETs comes through clearly. That combination is really key to getting that signature OCD sound. Warm, dynamic, but still really articulate.
So it's not just raw power, it's shaping the distortion intelligently. And its absolute biggest selling point, I think everyone agrees, was that touch sensitivity. Can you maybe describe how that feels when you're playing it?
Oh, it's huge. It really changes how you play. The pedal responds so much to how hard you pick. Pick lightly, it stays pretty clean, clear, dig in. And it just blooms into this rich, complex overdrive sound. But it's not just picking, it's the guitar volume too. You can set the pedal for, say, a good crunch.
Yeah.
Then just roll your guitar's volume knob back a bit and it cleans right up. You don't even need to touch the pedal. That means you get this huge range of sounds and dynamics just from one setting, controlled right from your guitar. It's incredibly useful.
And a big part of that flexibility is the HPLP switch, right? High peak, low peak. It's almost like getting two pedals in one.
It really is, yeah. HP, high peak mode, gives you a more aggressive sound, pushes the mids forward more. You get that real amp-like punch, great for cutting through for solos or heavier rhythm stuff. Then you flip it to LP, low peak mode, and it flattens out. It's much more transparent, closer to a clean boost type of feel. It colors your sound less, lets your amp's natural tone come through more, perfect for just adding a little grit or sparkle without a big EQ shift.
Let's also touch on voltage headroom. It runs fine at 9 volts, the standard, but you can run it at 18 volts too. What's the advantage there? What does that do for a player?
Right, running it at 18 volts gives you some really noticeable benefits. First thing is more headroom. That means the signal can get louder before it starts clipping, so it sounds cleaner and less compressed, especially at lower gain settings. You also tend to get a tighter bass response, less flubby, more defined low end, which is great if you want clarity, especially if you're playing complex chords or faster stuff. It just makes the whole pedal feel bigger and more open, almost like you switch to a higher wattage amp, you know?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
And all these things together, they add up to this incredibly wide tonal range. It's not just a one-trick pony at all.
Not even close. At really low gain, it works great as just a boost. Add sparkle, a tiny bit of grit, wakes up your clean tone. Turn the gain up to the middle, and yeah, it nails that edge of breakup sound, that sweet spot where the amp just starts to sing. And then if you crank the gain higher, it goes right into real distortion territory. But it stays clear, you know? You get sustain, the chords don't turn to mud. It really covers a lot of ground.
So if we kind of pull back and look at the big picture, all these design choices, the MOSFETs, the switch, the voltage,
Yeah.
it wasn't just about specs. It was about creating something more intuitive, right?
Yeah.
More expressive for guitarists.
Exactly. It was about making a tool that felt like an extension of the instrument itself, giving players this wider palette of sounds, but in a way that felt natural to control.
But you know, what's also fascinating is that the design wasn't set in stone. Fuller kept tweaking it over the years, didn't he?
Absolutely. The OCD wasn't static. It went through, I don't know, quite a few revisions. Each one had subtle changes, maybe to the EQ or the way it clipped or the headroom. And that's why you hear collectors getting really specific, you know, debating which version is the quote-unquote best. It shows this dedication maybe to refining it, constantly chasing that perfect sound, and probably listening to feedback from players too.
So what were some of those key early versions? How do they actually sound different?
Well, the very first one, V1.1 from 2004, people often describe that as being pretty bright, kind of aggressive, raw sounding.
Yeah.
Then you had V1.2 and 1.3, which generally smoothed out the EQ a bit. The highs weren't quite as brittle, maybe a bit easier to dial in for some people. Later versions, like V1.4 up to V1.7, they continued tweaking the mids and the gain structure. V1.4 often gets singled out. A lot of players feel that one really hit a sweet spot, a great balance between the grit and the clarity and that touch response. Tiny changes, but noticeable if you're listening closely.
Right. And then fast forward to 2017, there was a more significant update, version 2. What changed with V2?
Yeah, V2 was a bigger step. They added some key things. A JFET input buffer was one, basically a better way to handle the guitar signal coming into the pedal, keeping it pure. There was also an improved output buffer that helps drive long cables or other pedals without losing tone, which is a big deal on complex pedal boards. And they improved the bypass switching too, all aimed at making it sound more consistent and robust no matter what your setup was like.
Okay.
Oh, and there was also that limited run, the OCDG. That used germanium diodes for carping instead of the usual MOSFETs. Gave it a warmer, kind of softer, more vintagey feel, almost like a fuzzy overdrive. Appealed to folks chasing those older tones.
It really raises an interesting point. Why keep refining it? Speaks to that constant search for improvement, maybe.
I think so. And you have to remember, Fulltone wasn't just the OCD. They built this whole reputation for high-quality, often hand-wired stuff like the Full Drive, the Soul Bender. They were a major player in that whole boutique pedal scene. The OCD was arguably their biggest hit, but it was part of a bigger picture of quality and innovation.
Definitely. So let's shift focus to the players. Who actually used this thing? Who fell in love with the OCD?
Well, what's really striking is just how wide-ranging the list is. That amp-like quality made it fit into so many different styles. It wasn't just a rock pedal or a blues pedal. You look at someone like Gary Clark Jr. He's well known for using the OCD, often as a core part of his blues rock sound. It gives him that raw edge, that dynamic grit, but it still lets the notes ring out clearly. You can hear how it responds to his attack, especially live.
Yeah, that dynamic response is key. But it wasn't just for bluesy grit, right? Artists in different contexts used it too.
Oh, absolutely. Think about Ed O'Brien from Radiohead. He's known for creating these huge, layered soundscapes. He incorporated the OCD, often to push his amps into more textured territory, adding harmonics without just getting mushy. Even someone like John Mayer, whose tone is, let's face it, obsessed over. He's praised its responsiveness, how well it cleans up with the guitar's volume.
Right.
But it wasn't just the famous names. Its versatility meant countless working musicians adopted it. You heard it everywhere in worship bands, blues jams, indie rock clubs. It just worked for so many people. Trying to get great overdrive sounds reliably.
So, summing that up, what's its legacy? Where does the Fulltone OCD sit? in the history of guitar gear.
Well, it definitely played a huge part in that whole boutique overdrive explosion in the 2000s. It wasn't the only one, of course. You had Analog Man, Keeley, JHS doing amazing things too. But the OCD was right there, helping solidify that market, showing players there was something beyond the mass-produced stuff. It raised the bar.
And its success clearly influenced other pedal builders too, right? It kind of set a trend.
Yeah, you really saw a wave of pedals after it that were marketed as amp in a box, that focus on touch sensitivity, dynamic response, trying not to color the core tone too much. The OCD really helped popularize that whole approach. It showed you could get that feel of a cranked amp from a pedal. It inspired loads of builders and gave guitarists new sounds to explore. It's easily one of the best-selling boutique overdrives ever. People call it a modern classic for a good reason.
And there's that recent twist too. With Fulltone stopping large-scale production in 2022, the originals, especially those early V1s, they've become pretty collectible now, haven't they?
They really have. It adds another layer to its story. It went from being this workhorse pedal on thousands of boards to also being a sought-after piece of gear history. It just underlines its impact, really.
So connecting all those dots, the OCD wasn't just popular, it genuinely changed things. It shifted what players and builders expected from an overdrive pedal.
Exactly. It wasn't just about selling units. It redefined the category in many ways. It became a benchmark. Its influence is still felt today in countless pedals that aim for that same kind of dynamic amp-like response.
Well, there you have it. Our deep dive into the Fulltone OCD, a really iconic piece of guitar history. From its innovative beginnings and that really clever touch-sensitive design right through to the huge impact it had on guitar tone and the whole gear culture. It's undeniably one of the most important overdrive pedals of the last couple of decades.
Yeah, and looking at the OCD story, it really highlights how one really well thought out piece of tech can do more than just shape music for years. It becomes this collectible thing, reflecting both the original idea and how much people still value it. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other modern classics are out there right now, maybe still being made, that we'll be talking about like this in another 10 or 20 years? What will their legacy be?
That's a great thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. And as always, we encourage you to keep exploring the amazing world of sound and innovation. Until next time.